My name is Srđan. I am 33 years old, and I come from a small European country called Serbia. I do have a master's degree in economics, but I never really pursued that path after I finished college. Actually, for the past 5 years prior to joining lunch school, I was working as a professional online poker player and poker coach. And in that time, I have coached well over 100 students. Without false modesty, I was quite good at it, but poker as business is slowly dying, so I figured the best decision is to switch career. I have heard that many poker players switch to programming career. Most famous one is Hasid Qureshi, who finished App Academy, and after that got a job at Airbnb. So for poker, statistics is needed, and in school I was always quite good with math, so I figured this could be the right career path for me. And just to note, apart from these quote-unquote predispositions, I literally had zero knowledge about programming. I have heard about some programming languages like Java, PHP, HTML, CSS. I have never heard about Ruby, to be honest. And I have never written a single line of code in my life and didn't even know what a string is. But even though I did lack programming skills, when I joined lunch school, I was fairly good with setting goals and finding proper ways of achieving them. As while I was working as poker coach, I was not only teaching my students poker fundamentals, but also helping them move away from setting goals, which outcome is not in their full control, which leads to frustration, to the ones that they do have full control of. And in this presentation, I will focus on how to set the right kind of goals and move yourself closer to achieve them. So let's see the agenda for today's presentation. So first I will talk about what I mean by path to success and what are its components. Then I will try to answer one of the most common questions in programming: how long does it take to learn it? After that, I will give advice for setting long-term goals and how to create habits. And finally, probably most important parts are going to be the importance of focused work and power of consistency. Okay. So what are the components of path that will lead to success? Well, first, you need to set your main goal. And in a minute, I will talk how it should be done in my opinion. After that main goal is set, you need to choose proper path of achieving that goal. So how to get from point A, where you're currently at, to point B, where you want to be. And finally, you need to create habits that will move you closer to achieving your goal consistently. So what is the main goal? I personally view it as a desire, something to remind yourself of when you need motivation to keep moving forward. Example of that goal would be, I want to learn to code so that I will be able to get good quality job and start programming career. This goal doesn't have a time frame, as you cannot predict in advance how much time it will take you to master certain concepts. So why not set a time-based goal? Well, they create expectations, and they are often a source of disappointment and doubt if things do not progress exactly as planned, as we are not in full control of the outcome. So let me now talk about the most frequent questions people trying to learn programming ask. How long will it take me to learn to program? Or how long will it take me to finish the course? Guys that run lunch school gave the best answer for this question in my opinion, which is, it depends. And it sure does. While I was working as poker coach, the most frequent question I received from students was, when can I expect to start earning money from poker? Or similar one, when will I be able to earn $2,000 on average per month? And the answer was given to them was the same. It depends. Depends on what was the follow-up question. Depends on whether you have played poker before or not. Do you even know the rules? How talented are you for it? And most importantly, it depends on how much time you're willing to put into learning poker consistently. And same thing applies to learning to code. How long does it take to master the concepts in the course? Well, it depends on your previous coding experience. Have you finished some other courses before? Maybe some other boot camp? Or like me, you don't even know what a string is. But most importantly, it depends on how much time you're willing to put into learning to code consistently to achieve the results you want. So since you do not know how long will it take you to actually finish the course, setting a time limit is just a pure guessing game and can only lead to disappointment. And I will give you an example. One of my midterm goals was to finish 239 course. it's a final course in Lunch School Core. And before beginning of the course, if you had asked me to guess how long will it take me to finish the course, I would guess around 1 month, maybe month and a half, which, considering that on average it took me less than a month for each prior course, I think would be a reasonable estimate. And my guess would be very, very off. It turned out that the course is, at least for me, the hardest one so far, and I'm already in it longer than these 1.5 months. But since I didn't set any time limit up front, I'm not feeling frustrated. Is it easy? Of course not. And hitting plateau is definitely challenging, but in these times, you need to push yourself to be consistent. In these times, you need to remind yourself why you started learning to program. You need to keep setting daily goals, which I will cover later, and you need to trust in the process that sooner or later, you will break through that plateau and reach new highs. Now let's move on to choosing the right path. Once I decided I want to learn programming, I needed a clear path. So how to get from A, not knowing any programming language at all, to B, having a solid knowledge that will enable me to get a good quality job. And while searching for the right path, of course, I realized that the options were numerous. You can, for one, learn on your own. Then there are free courses like Free Code Camp and Odin Project. There are paid courses that last a fixed amount of time, for example, 3 months. And there is Lunch School, which didn't have time limit, and it was based on a monthly fee. And learning on your own, in my opinion, has several downsides. It's very hard to provide yourself direction in what you need to learn and in what order, because you don't have much experience to draw from. You don't know how deep you need to go into a topic before going on to the next course, and you don't know how to gauge where your skill level is. And with all these tools popping up every minute, it's easy to get lost and learn this to get a job instead of focusing on fundamentals. And that is what attracted me to Lunch School. It was focused on fundamentals. I knew how much fundamentals are important for poker. As before, you can learn to read players and decide your moves based on statistics of that particular player. You need to know fundamentals of poker game. You need to know the rules. You need to know poker terminology. So for example, you need to know what is 3-bet, what is c-bet, dong bet, bet versus miss c-bet, what those plays usually mean, how to respond to those plays in a default way if you don't have enough information. You need to learn about expected value and odds. For example, if expected value of a bet is greater than of a check, you should bet. But you need to know what expected value is and how to calculate it. Also, if you bet half pot, you need to know that if opponent folds more than 33% of times, you're getting instant profits. Your cards and your equity don't even matter. So if an opponent, for example, folds 50% on your half pot bet, you can bet all the time, regardless of your cards. So what about when you bet 2/3 of a pot? Well, then opponent needs to fold more than 40% of times for you to have instant profits, and so on. And let me return to programming now. As I have read other people saying, things are changing constantly in programming. And I didn't want to learn something just to find out that it's not used anymore. So focus on fundamentals did sound great. Also, there wasn't any time limit, which eliminates source of anxiety, where you feel pressure to learn something in 3 months, even though naturally it might take you longer. And finally, you learn things on a mastery level. And this is very beneficial for your programming career, and also when you apply for a job, if it's somewhat reasonable quality one. They will test your understanding of programming fundamentals. I will give you an example. My friend recently finished Angular course at a local programming school. It's one of those courses where they tell you that you'll build several apps and that you will be able to compete for JavaScript Angular programming jobs once you finish it. And just a few weeks ago, he actually applied for a position of JavaScript intern. It wasn't really a job, but still it was a good starting opportunity as this was a solid company. He wasn't accepted, unfortunately, and after the interview, he told me the questions he was asked. And apart from some questions regarding Angular and MVC, which he didn't know, the other 80% questions included very basic questions that any student who finishes Lunch School would be able to answer. For example, explain event loop, what is NaN, explain closure with examples, explain box model, and so on. Also, he was given a coding challenge, which was, in my opinion, almost twice easier than the one I got on 2019 JavaScript interview at Lunch School. So when I asked him, okay, what was the issue? He said, the questions were very hard, and they didn't even care much about the apps I have built so far, which proves why learning fundamentals at the mastery level is very important, and that is the reason why I picked launch school. Okay. So when you have main goal set and you know a path to achieve that goal, you need to create habits. As you might have noticed so far, I'm not a fan of time-based goals in a more public use sense. I'm going to lose 10 pounds in a month. I'm going to earn $100,000 in a year. I'm going to learn Ruby in 2 months, and so on. So what is the problem with these type of goals? Well, they rely on factors which we do not always have control of. And while I was working as poker coach, students would come to me enthusiastically saying, "Hey, Srđan, I have set up a goal for April." Okay, I would say, "What is that goal?" And then he or she would usually give me something like, "I'm going to earn $1,000 in April." To that, I would always say it's a terrible goal. And they would ask me, "But why? Is it not a realistic goal?" And for students playing those limits, and with that skill level, yes, it was a realistic goal. But the problem was, he or she wasn't in full control of the outcome, as in poker, in short term, luck plays a factor. For example, although I didn't have any losing month in over 5 years of playing poker actively, my monthly earnings were ranging from $500 to more than $5,000, which for a guy living in Serbia was quite a lot of money. So I would tell them to come back to me with a goal which they are in full control of. And after some thinking, students would return with the goal, "I want to play 150 hours next month." And that was very close to the right goal. I would only add that they should split that time into 120 hours of playing time and 30 hours of studying, as evaluating your game at least 1 hour each day was very important for the overall progress. And same is with programming. Setting a goal like, "I'm going to finish launch school in 6 months," is not the right kind of goal, in my opinion. If you don't have programming background, it might take you much longer to finish the course than it would take someone who has been working alone for some time, or who actually finished some other course before. Instead, set a goal, "I'm going to study launch school material 100 hours a month on average." And then you will set daily short-term goals that will move you closer to your longer timeframe goal. So basically, instead of setting goals which we do not have control of, we set the ones that we do have control of, and then we rely on creating habits. And the purpose of a well-crafted set of habits is to ensure that we reach our goals with the incremental steps. And let me quote Octavia Butler, American essay writer, for this. "First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you are inspired or not. Habit is persistence in practice." So how do we create a habit? We set up short-term goals and we work on them consistently. Let's focus on how to create SMART short-term goals. And what is SMART? SMART is a mnemonic acronym that you can use as guidance in goal setting. So S stands for specific. I will work X amount of hours on launch school material, for example, Ruby course. M stands for measurable. So goal needs to be measurable, and that is why I mentioned the amount of hours. Telling yourself that you're just going to work on something is not enough, since you cannot track progress on day-to-day basis and see if your goals are met. For example, my goal was to work on launch school material on average 5 hours a day. If you have a full-time job, of course, this number will be lower, but anything below 2 hours a day on average is not enough to be able to learn programming, in my opinion. So A stands for achievable. And what this means is that if you do have a full-time job, do not put your goal at 6 hours per day on average, because that just won't be possible to do consistently. Eventually, not achieving your goals will lead to disappointment, and your goals were unrealistic to begin with. I always remember my friend from college who was working part-time while studying and had a goal of studying every day for 5 hours before exam. And he would manage to pull it off for the first week, but then initial enthusiasm faded, and he would work less and less until he eventually quit. And similar things happen to people who go from eating junk food to the most strict diet ever invented, or to people who never exercised that start working out every day for an hour. In the beginning, when the enthusiasm is big, it works out, but soon it comes to an end. R stands for relevant. And this is self-explanatory. An example of relevant goal is to work, for example, on launchable material. Any goal that is moving you closer to your main goal is relevant. And finally, T stands for trackable. You need to be able to track your goals. On a daily time frame, any of the apps that I'm going to show you here is good enough. And on medium time frame, lunch school assessments are perfect. In fact, I have to add that lunch school assessments are, apart from the course content, the most important thing that separates this course from other courses. Since you cannot move through material without actually understanding it, as you won't pass the assessment. And if you do pass the assessment, then you know that you're ready for the next step and that you have achieved your goal. And this gives you a way to track your progress. So keeping track of time is a way to make coding a daily habit. By setting this one goal and having a way to track it, you're setting yourself up to succeed by continually improving your skills. And this is all required to become a master. Below, you can see a list of time tracking software. Personally, I use Toggle, which has Android app, desktop app, and iOS app, and it's fairly straightforward. You create a project. Example would be, I'm going to study Ruby. Press start when you begin studying and stop when you finish. Also, if you're away from computer 5 to 10 minutes, it asks you if you want to discard that time that you were away, which I always do. So while amount of work you put in is important, I would argue that quality and effectiveness of work is even more important, and that is where focus comes in. If you are not focused while working, you might not as well work at all. Effective practice is consistent, is intensely focused, and targets content or weaknesses that lie at the edge of one's current ability. I learned this the hard way while playing poker. If you're a professional online poker player, this usually means that you will play 6 tables or more at the same time. And this requires extreme amount of focus, as only a slight mistake can lead to significant losses. And what used to happen in the beginning was that I would play a session and somebody would call me on my phone. I would answer, of course, and keep playing while talking to that person. And it turned out that those phone calls were the most expensive ones I ever made. Since during that time, I sometimes folded aces pre-flop, which you should never do, by the way, since aces are the strongest hand in poker pre-flop. But even though I was looking at the screen, I missed that hand because I was focused on what the other person was saying. Or I would fold the strongest hand post-flop because time ran out. And it never happened when I was focused on my game. When I was multitasking, it started happening frequently enough that I stopped multitasking completely. So, based on over half a century of cognitive science and more recent studies on multitasking, it is known that multitaskers do less and miss information. It takes time, on average 15 minutes, to reorient to a primary task after a distraction such as an email. And efficiency can drop by as much as 40%. Long-term memory suffers, and creativity is reduced. We have a brain with billions of neurons and many trillions of connections, but we see incapable of doing multiple things at the same time. And sadly, multitasking doesn't exist, at least not as we think about it. We instead switch tasks. Our brain chooses which information to process. For example, if you listen to speech, your visual cortex becomes less active. Also, when you talk on the phone to someone and work on your computer at the same time, you literally hear less of what that person is saying, or you might miss something that is happening on your computer, like I did when I played poker. So, important question that I actually had when I started learning about this was, is listening to music considered multitasking? And the answer is, it depends. If you're doing repetitive tasks, then music can improve productivity. If you're about to start some cognitive task, listening to music prior to it can help with motivation. Also, relaxing, repetitive, low information load background music can enhance performance on cognitive tasks. Example would be the music from site brain.fm, or you can search on YouTube, study music. It's usually some instrumental music. Unfortunately, popular music with lyrics introduces a multitasking situation that interferes with reading comprehension and information processing. So what to do? When you start your study session, turn off Facebook, Skype, Slack, mobile phone. Tell your parents and spouse not to disturb you. Do not listen to music with lyrics. It will be very hard in the beginning since you're not used to it, but you will get used to it, and benefits that you get from focused studying will be huge. So set aside at least 2-3 hours a day on average of focused work on lunchable material. You cannot multitask, so stop trying. You need to focus while working, but you also need to work consistently every day. Now, I'm not going to tell you that creating habits is easy. As for programming, you're required to do it at least 2 hours a day. What I can say, though, is that if you do it consistently, it gets easier in time. Consistency is the key to success. It leads to habits. Habits form the actions we take every day. Actions lead to success. As Anthony Robbins said, it's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives, it's what we do consistently. And why is consistency important? First, it creates momentum. And momentum is based on the idea that an object in motion stays in motion. And that is why it's much more effective to learn programming 2 hours each day than to work 12 hours once a week. When we are consistent with anything we do, we stay in motion. And by staying in motion, we get our momentum, which is fuel that pushes us forward. Consistency also increases willpower. For example, I work out every day for half an hour upon waking up. It is something that turned into a habit now and has significantly reduced the decision fatigue I once had when I needed to push myself to work out. Consistency also amplifies skill level as it moves you from a place of conscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And finally, remember that consistency is a learned skill. Again, poker has taught me the importance of consistency. As luck plays a factor in poker, as I said before, there are times when you might play well and results are not that good, and also there are times where results are much, much better than your game is. And poker results shouldn't be looked at the short time frames, only on 50,000 played hands or more. And for that, you need around 100 hours of playing time or maybe more. And that is the reason why I was saying to my students that 100 hours a month is the minimum amount of time they need to devote to poker if they want to succeed. Actually, it should be a little bit more since you need to set aside time for studying as well. What I saw in reality was that students would play a lot when they were earning money, and then they weren't studying a lot. And I would constantly need to remind them to set aside time for studying. And when they were in downswing, which means they were losing money, they would play very little. By the way, if you saw in movies or heard stories that usually people who lose money don't want to stop playing and eventually they lose everything, those are typical gamblers, people with gambling problem. And my students who wanted to learn to play poker didn't have gambler's mentality, which meant they would feel demotivated, sad, and scared when they would lose money a few days in a row. And I would ask them, so you know that poker results should not be looked at on short time frame. You're also playing good poker, so what is the problem? To which I would receive an answer, I just don't feel like playing. You know, I lost twice in a row aces against kings in 3 minutes, which by the way is like 4% chance of happening. But that does happen in poker frequently enough as we play 50,000 hands per month. And so I would follow, have you hit your stop loss, which is by the way, the amount of money that you can lose in a day. If you lose more than that limit, let's say $100, you should stop playing that day since your mindset is probably not going to be right after that kind of loss. And also, I would ask, are you playing well? And they would respond, I lost only $20 and I was playing great, but it was in first 5 minutes and I just felt I'm going to lose more. And this is the third day I'm losing money. And I don't even know that I'm a good poker player anymore. Will I ever earn money from poker again? And so on. And this, of course, was completely irrational and emotion-driven thinking. And it was a very wrong approach to downswing and negative feelings, as the best poker players I coached learned to play consistently every day, following their goals and plans, despite their feelings. They would study even though they were winning, and they would still playing even though they didn't feel like it as they were losing money. Since while they're playing good poker, which means they're making plus EV decisions, they're going to win money in the long term. and they did. Okay. And although in programming, there are no upswings or downswings like in poker, you can, however, hit a plateau. And when you do, and majority of us do, sooner or later, you might become more or less demotivated. Maybe you will start to doubt yourself, asking questions like, is programming really for me? Or you just might not feel like doing any work since you feel like it's going nowhere. In these times, my advice is to accept your feelings, feel them, but push yourself to keep working daily on your programming skills. And let me explain this further. Our emotions are controlled by the limbic part of the brain. And if you've never heard about this before, idea is that there are 3 layers of the brain. Oldest one, reptilian, which controls body vital functions such as heart rate, breathing, body temperature, balance. There is middle one, limbic, which controls emotions. And there is newest one, neocortex, which is responsible for cognitive functions like speaking and thinking. Older parts of the brain are quote-unquote stronger, which is the reason why it's very hard to rationally explain someone who is afraid of something irrational that there is nothing to be afraid about. Rationally, he might even know this, but emotions are usually stronger and they overwhelm us. So when you do hit plateau, if you get the feeling that programming is maybe not for you, that you will quote-unquote never understand this part of the course, my advice is not to fight your feelings, but let them be. But push yourself to keep working daily on coding and push yourself to be consistent despite your feelings. This will eventually push you through the plateau, and that will quote-unquote eliminate your negative feelings and side effects. And later, you're going to hit next plateau. And when that happens, you have to remind yourself that this is a good thing, that this means you're learning a new concept, and we all must struggle with things at first in order to master them. And eventually, you will have another aha moment. So a few things that could help you with being consistent. Operate with checklists, to-do list objectives in mind. For example, in the evening, write down, tomorrow I will work 3 hours, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and, for example, from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And stick to that. Remind yourself frequently of your desires and passions. Remind yourself of your main goal. Hold on to your beliefs and trust yourself. Do not give up and always finish what you started. And finally, the most important thing is maintain your health and well-being. Identify what your body needs to operate at optimal health and work toward achieving consistency with everything you do. And finally, I would like to share my own story. On 10th of August last year, I enrolled Launch School and I made a decision to study 5 hours a day on average. I remember that on the first assessment of the prep course, Chris asked me if I'm sure that I will be able to do that consistently, since it's not an easy task. And I said that I believe I could. And from August to January, I have studied more than 700 hours, which is around 5 hours per day. In January, due to other responsibilities, I had to reduce the amount of hours I'm working on LS material to 3. And from January until now, on average, I have put more than 3 hours per day of studying time. And these results are what I'm most proud of. Not how many courses I have finished or how fast I have finished them. I don't care about that. What I do care, and what is important to me, is that I made a decision and I stuck with it. I was consistent and I came very close to achieving my goal. And so can you. Just be consistent. Thank you. And do you have any questions? No questions? Okay, guys, if there are no questions, I thank you for attending this presentation and see you guys. Bye-bye.